I want to take the opportunity here to introduce Dr. Jim Wilder, who is the Shepherd's House Director. And Jim is an author, a speaker. He's many things, but I can remember hearing Jim in the late 90s when I was new as a pastor and pretty fresh into ministry. And Jim shared something that really ended up being a life preserver to my ministry more than I ever realized. And Jim talked about joy and relational joy and why we need joy and how we're actually designed for joy. And so it's no surprise to those of you who are familiar with our training to know that Jim is going to talk about starting joy today. And so Jim Wilder, thank you for being a guest here on the Pastor JOYStream. It's good to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you as well. I'm looking forward to this time together. And we're going to be talking a little bit about our new book here. I'm trying to click all the right buttons and get technically sophisticated enough to do two things at once. You know, that's going to be a major challenge right there. But we're going to talk about Joy Starts Here, and that's the book that we've been working on lately. I know that a number of you have been following that in one way or another. By the way, I see that Andre has joined us there from the Netherlands. Welcome, Andre, and it's good to see Hoka and Joel as well. And then we have Ken Smith, who I know as well, and you've been working with us on preparing many of the applications for the life model before, and so all three of you represent international applications of the life model. You know, four of you, if we consider Joel and Hoka are well, they're one but two, you know, that sort of a thing when you get married. Talking of starting Joy, I had the chance to marry them down in Mexico, just like I had a chance to marry you too, Chris. So
yes, you did.
Yes, that's all part of Joy starting. But we're not talking about that here. What I wanted to talk with you about was what was new in our Beta 2 version of the book. As you know, we're writing it together as a community. We have the four writers, and I represent the theory in that case, and Ed Corey represents the application to addictions, Chris Coursey, the application to churches and pastors, and then we have Sheila Sutton, who's working on the educational side of things. So it's a wonderful crew to have together, and as we've been working on that, we've also been trying to set up an assessment system, some kind of way of deciding how badly do we need to apply these principles to our lives. And so, as most of you are familiar, the joy is the sort of the center of the self-propagating recovery model. That is, everything that we know that's important about character only spreads from one person to another when we're glad to be together. And so without joy, none of the things that we're trying to spread to the world are going to actually happen. So we decided that it would be very useful if we as users would be able to do some kind of assessment of the basically how our readers are doing with this. So let's say you're a pastor, which is what you would be at this webinar most likely, and you want to know how your church is doing. Well, one of the ways that you can do that is to have a study group, have everyone read the book, and as they're going along, they can answer questions of various sorts. And we've actually set up a number of scales that are now in the Beta 2 version, and I thought I would just take you through one of them. One we're going to look at is the Shalom scale. Then I'll just name the other ones as we're going along. But Chris, the reason that I thought I would you pick the shalom scale today is that it's a pretty good indication of the spiritual condition of your congregation. Shalom happens when we have that interactive sense of God's presence going on in our lives. And when we're not really aware of God, then we're basically practicing religion of one form or another. And most of that tends to lead to less than peaceful coexistence. And so let's just look at this. And what I'd like to suggest is if you have a piece of paper around, that you simply go ahead and write down your answers. This will be 10 questions. Each one of them scores from 1 to 10. And so all we want you to do now is just write down the answer to your questions. Let's see if I can get this thing to give me my first question here. There we go. All right, so this is the assessment for the Emmanuel Shalom. And the first question is, every time something bothers me, I talk with God until I feel better. So 0 would be very rarely to not at all, and all the way up to 10 would be almost always. So as you're thinking about it for yourself, what would you answer for yourself individually? But then think about this also in terms of a group or a church that you would be giving this survey to. Now, our purpose eventually is to have this survey online so that not only could every individual take this survey and get a score, but you could also get an assessment of your entire church or whatever other group you're working with. And in fact, the people that are working with the Thriving Community Recovery programs would also be able to use this as part of Thriving Recovery then to just find out how everyone in their group would be doing at that point. So there's the first question. Hopefully you've got your score down on that one now. Let's go to the second question. When things go wrong at church, we still feel peaceful. That's a very significant question. Obviously you can't have a church fight if this is the case. So on the one side you would answer not likely if it was down at 0, or all the way up to 10, that you have solid peace even if your church is under imminent nuclear attack. And so just think of it now in terms of your experience at church. How would you describe the situation there? Give you a second to think about it, then we'll move on to question 3. Again, going back to the Emmanuel side of Shalom, I feel God with me. And the answer would be not at all. 2, 10, consistently. Question 4. Most of the time I feel very peaceful inside. From not likely to we have solid peace at 10. How would you describe yourself over time? Question 5. Prayer helped me to see others differently many times this last year. And that goes from never at 0 to, again, constantly at 10. Here's a question intended to see whether in my relationships with others, and particularly the people that cause me difficulties, do I have the custom of going and talking to God about those situations? Number 6, my church family helps me find God's perspective when I'm distressed. And 0 would be no help there, and 10 would be reliably. So what do your church resources look like? Question number 7. I generally like who I am. 0 would be not at all, up to 10 most of the time. And here we're looking for the more long-term effects of Emmanuel Shalom. If you have a practice of seeking God's presence about everything in your life, including the things about you, you will reach after a period of time a general sense that you like who God has created you to be. And that's sort of the cumulative effect of practicing shalom over a long period of time, not just your immediate situation. Number 8, I can clearly tell of times when God changed my perspective. Not at all at 0. To 10, many memories. And again, one of the effects of Emmanuel Shalom is that we find God changing our perspective. That's essentially what happens in Emmanuel healing events. So those who've had many of these opportunities will already be showing evidence of a good Emmanuel Shalom kind of lifestyle. Number 9, I feel appreciation most of the day. 0, not at all, up to 10 most of the time. Appreciation is a good sign of our joy levels. And 10, love often moves me out of my comfort zone. And that's a good indication again, from not at all, 0, up to 10 most of the time, whether we are trying to live a comfortable life or whether we are trying to live a life of love where we're guided by God in terms of our various responses and interactions. So what you would do then is you would total up your scores, and then you would, on each page we have a little scale at the bottom from 0 to 100, and you would just make a mark there in terms of how high up the scale you go. So I'll be quiet a second and let you add the 10 numbers. And then as you're looking at that, I'll show you what the page would actually look like if you were looking at it in the book. It has this kind of layout to it, so you can circle the numbers at the bottom. You total up your score, mark the matching spot on the scale, and now you have an idea that's very good for discussion purposes. Now, the first thing that most people are going to ask, if you are sophisticated in terms of assessments, are what does the score mean? I mean, what is the difference between if you score a 40 or an 80? And we actually do not have norms for these tests, and at the present time we don't plan to have any norms for them. We plan to have norms for the online version, which is actually going to have probably about twice as many questions as this one does. But the purpose of this is not to get a score per se and say, well, you know, I scored a 50, so I'm doing pretty well. The purpose of this is to start a discussion as part of a group with how you feel your overall levels went. And obviously, if your scores are down near the bottom, you're not having a lot of shalom. And if they're up near 100, well, in most cases, we'll wonder if you're lying. But the discussion starter is right there all the same, and that's what the purpose of the book is, to be able to have a group discussion in your church about how do we live this as a style, and these are some ways that you can go at looking at it in yourself. Now, one other thing that you might want to keep in mind, and that is something that you'll get to hear because you are on this webinar, this JOYStream, but it's nowhere printed. That is, if you look at the items one of the things that we wanted to do was not only assess how much shalom the individual has, but looking at their community, how many kind of shalom experiences were they having as part of a community. So it's not just about the individual, it's also about the place where you live. So if you look at all of the odd-numbered questions, 1, 3, 5, 7, and on down, those are all about the individual, where all the even-number questions, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, are about the community. So if you were going to use this in a counseling situation, you could compare what the person's answers were individually, how am I doing, separately from how my community is doing. Now, in this particular case with the assessment of Emmanuel Shalom, we're looking at how is my church community doing, but this also will give us some indications about how families are doing as we look at some of the other scales. So again, if you want to do a comparison for counseling purposes, you can total up and you'd have a maximum of 50 points for individual versus community, and that'll make a bigger difference perhaps on some scales than others, but it would let you know whether the person involved sees themselves as the problem or resource, or whether it's the community they're in. So a little helpful thing for you pastors to use in your counseling practice. Now let's see here. Let's look briefly at the 12 scales that we have, and each of the chapters has one. And we've set up 3 positive scales as part of the chapters. There's 9 chapters in the book, and 6 problem-oriented scales. So the first positive factor is the assessment of joy. And obviously in the assessment of joy, half of the items would be about how joyful am I. The other half of them are how joyful is my environment, which would include family and church and the people that are my friends and the people that I'm usually around. So you'd be able to look at that and say, well, here's a person who's very joyful, but they live in a very low joy situation. Or the other way around, here's somebody who's surrounded by a good deal of joy, but they themselves are dragging at the bottom. So there's a very positive answer we want to have about what are the levels of joy that are going on in your particular environment, and that's very important to know when we're trying to think about churches or families as well. Just how well are we doing? The second scale is the assessment of pseudo-joy, and that's one of the ones that we're calling a negative scale, because we're actually trying to measure things like beeps. You're probably familiar with beeps now. Those are the things that we get addicted to that fill our lives instead of joy. And so it gives us an idea on that assessment. What have we got that's filling our life to replace joy? And it's an indication of the level of problems, again, for the individual or for the community. So you could, again, compare whether the person, let's say, might not be practicing a lot of pseudo-joy practices, but they're in a family that is. That would be one of the things that you could use for that comparison for. Third evaluation is the readiness for transformation, and that is one of the positive ones. You read in the Joy Starts Here book, possibly, if you've had a chance to look at it, about the transformation zone. So at the end of the chapter about the transformation zone, the question is, how ready for transformation are we? The 3 factors needed for transformation, are they present and active in our lives and community, or are we a long ways away from that? So that's important, again, positive readiness for pastors that are looking for lives to be changed in their church and for their church to be changing lives in their community. This is going to be a very big indicator, because if you are not ready for transformation, you may have people, but they're not going to be having their lives changed. Then we have the environmental pseudo-maturity assessment, and that is, again, not just environment or individual, but a combination of both. So one of the things we've deliberately tried to do is to keep this from being something that felt to any one person like I'm being put on the spot here. You're asking all the questions about me. So this allows us to look at what kind of indicators of pseudo-maturity do we have going on in my life and the environment around me. Again, maturity is much harder to assess than pseudo-maturity. Because pseudo-maturity, regardless of whether I'm at infant maturity or adult maturity or parent maturity, and each of those would have very different characteristics based on the maturity. The effects of pseudo-maturity at any age are all pretty similar. So people are making decisions out of fear, and they are limited in much the same ways regardless of what stage you might be at. So again, it's a much easier measure to put out for us, and it helps us detect how big the problem is. The next one after that is environmental self-justification assessment. That one, I must say, we have intentionally made obscure. So if you're going, what are they asking about? That's precisely what we want people wondering when they take this. Now, when you take the assessment online, when we ever get that ready, and it's looking for the right software and I think some more funding, but when we get that online, you won't have a heading at the top of your page to sort of let you guess exactly what we're trying to measure here. We're expecting that environmental self-justification assessment will be obscure enough that most people won't feel the same reaction if we said narcissism. Self-justification is the hallmark of narcissism, and environmental is both me and the people around me. So I want to be assessing both, and to how well we actually live a humble life, and how well we do at trying to justify and protect and otherwise make ourselves more perfect than we actually are. The reason this is so incredibly important to the Joy Starts Here project is that every time I have seen a significant collapse in a community, or a community that was doing well and then it just got into trouble, it was because some kind of narcissism got introduced, either through a leader or a participant. And it really doesn't particularly matter whether it was a leader or participant. Communities that are trying to build joy are very soon going to be infiltrated by people who basically see this whole thing as existing for their own purposes, and they justify whatever they do to get it all for themselves. So there we have this self-justification kind of taking in and chewing up the works. So it's very important to look at. It's also an important safeguard to keep a community from abusing the Joy Starts Here model. So if you have a narcissistic leader, but they want to take this material and use it for transformation, but to transform people into whatever they want to transform them into, it's going to be much harder to do that if their whole group is asking the question, is this leader narcissistic? And so it's an abuse protection right there. Then we just went through the assessment of Emmanuel Shalom, so you know all about that one. And then we also have an evaluation for pseudo-shalom, the things that replace shalom in our lives. And from there we move to the pseudo-return to joy assessment for the things that we use instead of returning to joy, which is often the things we use to cover over a problem. So we try to pretend like everything's fine when in fact it isn't. And that would be one way of describing pseudo-return to joy. And we're looking for that in the individual and the environment. And then the disruption of protector skills propagation looks again at the community, family, individual, to see how prevalent are the factors that are keeping us from developing, spreading the kind of gentle protector skills that we would also call the 19 relational skills or the 19 thrive skills. And this is looking for the factors that would keep that from spreading from person to person. Those are also factors that keep us in low joy. Then at the end, we have a comparison, and this is on one page, where you are actually asked to look again at the readiness for transformation. So it's very similar to the third test we were talking about. But this time it's comparing them with homeschool and church. Now, if you haven't had a chance yet to hear it, the reason that we have chosen homeschool and church is that those are the three primary ways in which all children will have their joy levels determined. Much of what happens for their individual lives and family lives starts at home. Much of what happens for them socially starts at school. And what happens for us spiritually starts at church. So in terms of starting joy, if we were going to intervene strategically across the world, the three places we would want to make sure we're producing high joy levels would be home, school, and church. So now I've read the book. I've found out that joy is very, very important. Where do I start? And this scale lets you rate your home, school, and church for readiness for transformation. And as a result, I can say, comparing the three places that I might start, it looks like the best place I could get going might be at school or home or church. Now, one of the things you can always do with this assessment is you can substitute something for those any of those categories if you want to use it that way. So instead of school, I could use work. But why didn't we put work there to begin with? Well, the reason is that while we might spend a lot of time in work as adults, it's not a place that was originally designed for the formation of individuals. And so usually by the time most people get to work, they've had their joy levels quite nicely shaped by homeschool and church already. So we suggest that people evaluate the school that they might currently be involved with, like the school that their children attend, or in the case of the Korean churches in the Chicago area, the school that the church is actually located in. So they rent the school facilities. Or if you want to look at this historically and use the assessment for what formed me, you can say, well, let me look at my own childhood, home, school, and church experiences, and I can use the same assessment to figure out which of those places were the ones that were really helping me to transform and grow. But primarily it's used for aiming at the present. So that would give you a little indication of what's in Joy Starts Here in the beta version, and a little bit of what you could anticipate coming up, as well as how you could use this for counseling with individuals. Now, if you happen to be one of those wonderful people who ran right out and went to the Joy Starts Here website and ordered a Beta 1 book, what I want you to know is that you can get a copy of the assessment for a download by just going to the Joy Forum, which is right here. You have to sign in as a member of the forum. It's free. But once you're on the forum, you can come down here to the Joy Starts Here book, and the beta is available. So you come right here. Here's a link on the Joy Starts Here where you can download a copy of the book, and you will have to enter a code, which is on page 250 of the beta book. Just look on that book. There's only one thing printed on the page. That's what you put in as your code. So go ahead and use that. But that would let all of you start working with the materials, and then we would love to have your feedback on the Joy Starts Here site. If you're not interacting with us, yet on the Joy Forum. I'll go back to that again, and let's see if I can go to the index. Wanted to show you that on the forum there's Joy Starting at Church, with a section for pastors and one for youth workers. And so we would love to have your interaction as pastors on what you're experiencing with Joy Starting, and particularly now that we're getting to the assessment section, which is what we're really excited about testing with churches. What are you experiencing as you are trying this in your churches and small groups and in counseling? And this might be a good time, Chris, although it's not directly related to what we're talking here, to just mention that for pastors that are looking for sermon materials for Joy Starting, you're beginning a collection of materials on our website that start with, well, what day did you choose to start the whole thing with Joy Starting?
Well, I have to say that's the exciting part of all of this for me, because all of the first preparation materials that I've designed are for Father's Day, which is coming up Sunday, June 16th. So that is right around the corner. What is that, 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks. And I'm very excited about this, because the whole focus of the sermon for Father's Day is how joyful fathers reflect our Heavenly Father. And so I've put together a teaching outline that's fairly in-depth for pastors to use, and they can trim and use as necessary for their time frame. I have PowerPoint available, and there are exercises throughout the resources there that pastors can do, so that the congregation is able to engage this exciting topic of a joyful father. And there's a lot of helpful resources here, and I'm really excited about this new adventure, because really as pastors we are looking for those resources that we can take and start applying. And so pastors, this is available, that you don't have to prepare your own sermon. It's already there. All you have to do is tweak according to your own personal preference and time frame. So we will have this updated. I have a slide I'm going to show you here pretty soon, but we will have this information up on the Joy Starts Here website in coming days. There will be a place under the Pastor's Weekly section. So you'll just have to click a link, and you'll find these resources at your disposal for free. So very exciting. Yes. Yes.
So Denny, if you want to move the screen back over to Chris.
Okay.
And we'll start getting some interaction here from our pastors.
Yes. Very good. All right, let's see. You'll be able to see my screen here, and looks like we have it. All right. Okay. So, Jim, I want to say, as you were going through the Shalom assessment, one of the things that's really exciting for me, and I suspect our viewers who are with us today are going to feel the same way, I found a lot of clarity on some of my weaknesses that I need to work on. And I also found a lot more clarity on some of my strengths and some of those areas that need a little bit of attention or a lot of attention. And so I'm really excited about these assessments, because it does take the information, the training, the material to an entirely new level for me, my family, my staff, my colleagues, my congregation. We have just, this is exciting in so many ways. But I want to hear from our people today, our friends. We're going to have some questions here that I thought would be helpful for us to talk about, but you may have your own questions for Dr. Wilder as we go along. So let us know, let Denny know if you have something you want to share. But I'll go ahead and just kind of put a few things out there to start. So as Jim mentioned here, our assessment today was for Shalom. But basically, one of the blessings of these assessments is to help us gauge those strengths and those weaknesses that we have, as well as for our congregation. Because when this is available online, our congregations can also go through these assessments to gauge corporately where are our weaknesses. Are we a joyful congregation? Are we ready for that transformation that Jim talked about today? So there's just going to be a lot of options here, and we can gauge how is my relational joy versus what's artificial. A lot of us, myself included, but a lot of the people that I hear from are quite surprised to realize their joy levels aren't quite what they thought they were once the flashlight is shown on their specific joy. And that's where those beeps that Jim talked about can come into play. So,
Chris, thinking along those lines, we do have Ken Smith here. I don't know if he's got audio, which would be really nice if he did. But I know he does a lot of assessment with churches. That's one of the things that he does, is going out helping churches see where they are. He's had experience with churches that thought they could go ahead and get on with missionary work or other kind of outreach work. And one of the things he is very familiar with is helping churches get a good idea of where they actually are and where they need to grow. So if you have audio there and you're able to get on with us, I'd love to hear what you would say about the importance of assessing where your church is.
All right, so Ken, I just unmuted you.
Hi, Ken. Are you with us?
He just typed in a question. Not on audio today. Okay.
All right. All right.
All right. Yeah, there we go.
Ken has a lot. Ken's presence is on the Joy Forum, so I do hope that all of you will take a look at the Joy Forums, because Ken just has such experience, and he's really been digesting the Joy Starts Here book, and so I hope that you'll take a look at Ken's work there.
Again, the forums are found at JOYStartsHere.com.
Yes. All right.
So if anybody else wants to raise their hand so I can unmute them, we can get some of this interaction going, or I can just unmute everybody and find out what happens.
So one of the thoughts as we do this here, one of the thoughts I want to put out there is you went through the assessment. What did you discover? Was there anything new or surprising or unexpected as you went through those questions that Jim gave us today? I'd really love to hear some thoughts, some observations.
All right, Christine, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Hi, Christine.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm telling you, this, to me, maybe I'm a Pollyanna, but it actually had the opposite effect on me. I was pleased because I've never been a real added any positive to joy-filled environments, let alone very full of joy myself until a few years ago, working with the Thrive model and everything. And I was just like in awe of, wow, I can remember a few years ago when I would have been a 3 and maybe I was 6 in a couple of my weak areas, or I had some 8s, and I think that your idea about doing the group study with the book and having this would just explode with the interaction and people having insight as to not only, wow, this is an area that maybe I thought I was a little further along in, but just the ability to look maybe back at a process as well, And I don't know if it would be helpful to do some of these now and then do like a post test. I'm an educator, and you like to do the pre-test and the post test. How that down the line we could look at maybe doing a little post test of some of these to help encourage people to see how their joy capacity is growing in certain areas, or that their joy environment, that their environment is more full of joy than it was maybe a year ago or something like that. I'm not sure how that would work, but that was just a suggestion.
I
Well,
like
I
that.
rather like the suggestion a whole lot. One of the things we intend to do is to put these assessments at the beginning and end of the thriving community programs and modules. But one of the other reasons why we'd like to have it online is so that we could let participants take it before and after going through a study group even, just as simple as Joy starts here, and have a chance to be able to look at scores before and afterwards. So that is one of the things we would really, really like to have people be able to be encouraged by. I'm glad it's been encouraging for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, that is. Thank you. Yeah, I'd find that both personally within my family as well as my staff or congregation, if we were able to take the assessment before we started really strategically, proactively applying this and growing joy. How encouraging to see how many miles we've come as we've been on this journey.
Yeah, and
Now you
also,
mentioned, oh, go ahead. You mentioned that you were an educator, which made me wonder, one of the harder places for us to actually think of how to apply this is to the area of education, particularly in terms of public schools. I think a private school, especially a private Christian school, might be quite agreeable to taking this assessment and then working on their joy levels during the year. But do you have any ideas of how this could be used to measure whether, in fact, we're having a good impact on school systems?
oh yeah, because there isn't anything that we do out. I mean, I'm retired now, but there's not anything available for this. Everything is skill, focused and passing test focused. But there's nothing like this because, and we have to deal in low joy environments all the time. Schools have become that a lot, and particularly I was in special ed. But what I also wanted to say too is that now that I'm retired from this, my husband and I do marriage, premarital, and parenting counseling too as well. And I could see even the pre and post test with something like that, or in any counseling situation you could give. It wouldn't be maybe about the church. It might be about their community, their home, that would really, really, shine the light on some things. So this is really helpful.
Yes,
Thank
it
you,
is.
Christine.
Thank you. Good to hear from you.
By the way, what part of the country are you in, Christine?
You can tell it's the South. We're in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Okay, very good. Well, welcome to Wilmington.
Yes, very good. Anyone else have any thoughts on this? That's very encouraging to hear, and we're all on this journey.
Yeah, while someone is getting online, I'll just mention the 3 elements of transformation there are the basis for comparing the home and school and church on the test. They're the tender response to weakness, the weak and the strong interacting, and the presence of Emmanuel Shalom. And where these all 3 are high is where you have a good readiness for transformation already going on. So that's probably the most encouraging place to start if you want the joy to spread as opposed to want to tire yourself out.
I don't have any other
that is
hands
very
up there
helpful
yet.
lens as we start looking at this. Okay, all right. Well, friends, do feel free to jump on in here. I always have plenty to say, but you know what? I would rather hear from you. So any thoughts or anything that strikes you about what we're talking about today? I'd really like to hear that. And I'm just going to put another question down here as we're going along because, frankly, when I go through this material, I start taking a good hard look at what are the things that motivates me, and how does that impact the qualities that people see in me, or even the legacy that I'm going to leave. And so as leaders, it's good to really start thinking about some of these things.
Sandra just typed in, and along with the school train of thought, what we're talking about just a moment ago. She said it would be so good for this to be in schools. In fact, she's actually heard that people are doing yoga in elementary schools now to try to bring peace. So if they can introduce yoga, they can introduce joy.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, that's a really good point. Just imagine how joy and quieting and some of these things really would transform that classroom. In fact, Sheila Sutton has shared a lot of her story, and a big part of her story is how she's applying this in the classroom. And it's been quite transformative for her students, for their grades, for their behavior, even how other teachers are starting to really embrace some of what she's doing is exciting. So if you haven't read the book yet, you could learn a lot more about Sheila. And we've been talking about a Joy Starts Here event this fall where Sheila will be one of our speakers, as well as Bill St. Cyr from Ambleside Schools. And they're going to give us a whole lot of good training and teaching about how to apply this as educators in that environment.
Sheila started a joy starting group among the teachers in her school, and also has been using this with her students. And she just got some award, I think, from the Parent-Teacher Association or the equivalent or something like that, and the award for being the teacher that thinks out of the box, some things like that. I'm probably getting the details wrong, but she's not here to correct me exactly what the honors were. The effect is already being noticed, and again at the public school system. So there's plenty of need for joy, and it really has a significant impact on how the classroom functions and how well teachers do at the end of the year as well. So one of the things I think we need to remember in terms of building joy is to keep the joy level high among teachers, because there's much within the educational system that's going to wear their joy down. But that's pretty much what we want to do with pastors, elder boards, and families. So how can we go about building this joy? And it's interesting to me, again, going back to tender response to weakness, that is something that's really important to teach everybody in the community, something we could probably spend a lot of time talking about, because it often feels like the underdog, whoever it is, doesn't have to have a tender response to the weakness in others. So when we're the one who thinks we're being hurt, somehow it seems to justify us being less than tender in response. And while we need to correct the lack of tenderness in the people with power, this is a problem that goes right across the board. Weak or strong, it tends to be that we don't respond to the weaknesses in others with any kind of tenderness. And once that happens, then our communities become a low joy and hostile environment. So it's, I think, a very important thing for us to teach even-handedly as we're pastors.
Yeah, you know, and I was just thinking, Jim, for pastors especially, I tell you, it's easy to really get focused on problems and feel like all of our time and energy is going into problems, and how problems become amplified when the tender responses to weakness are lacking, both within our staff, our elder boards, as well as in our congregation. So this really is, that piece is so important for the health of a community. We cannot emphasize that one enough.
Well, I have a comment in here from Andre, whose mic is not working very well, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it. In answer to your question there on the board, this is what motivates you. He says, what motivates me is a mutually encouraging encounter. That's a real person and a heart relation. Even when it wasn't joyful, such as in the case of sharing grief, I experience new energy afterwards.
Wow. That's a quality I've really appreciated about Andre, is a very relational, joyful, caring person. And you know, those are qualities where we really need our joy buckets fulfilled as we are serving others. So thank you, Andre. That's really good to hear. Good to hear from you. We only have just a minute or two left. I'd really like to hear any other thoughts as we're going along here before I move along to a few other slides on upcoming opportunities. So anyone else have a thought you'd like to share with us today? Anything else striking you as we're going along here?
I'm not getting anything.
All right. All right. Well, again, I'd like to just kind of close.
Sorry, Andre says, I appreciate the emphasis on tenderness in responses.
Well, Chris, I'd like to thank you here for having me into your gathering of pastors here. It's one of the more important things we can do is gather, and you know, on the one hand, I'm sort of the one that campaigns against trying to live our lives over the media, because there are some things that we just simply can't do this way to build joy. And on the other hand, there are other things that we can do by long distance and internet, and but we'll have to work all together to overcome the sort of isolation that this media tends to produce. So I'd like to encourage all of your listeners to get your headsets and microphones and figure out how to be able to get online as part of the discussions, because the more we're able to discuss this, and the farther this goes along, the more it'll be sharing ideas. I mean, really, the authors of the book are trying to kick off a discussion on a global level about how we're going to start joy as Christians, because that's important for us. And we need to have a global discussion, which this context actually lets us do, Chris. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. I would encourage all your other participants to think of ways that they can also be a part of it in future discussions.
Well, thank you. Well, it is an honor to have you here. And, you know, there's a lot more where this came from. And I hope that our viewers today will follow up with some more of these opportunities, because, you know, as Jim's mentioned here, we can talk about joy all day long, but ultimately we have to go and start joy. And that's what changes lives. And so one of the things I'm going to be talking about at our next two joy streams are the nuts and bolts of some of your needs. I really want to get down to the nitty-gritty. What are your challenges? What do you need as a pastor, as a leader, to effectively shepherd your family and your congregation? And we're going to look at some of the assessment topics as a part of that discussion. So please join me on June 6th, June 27th for this time. It's going to be very meaningful. Bring your pastor friends, bring your colleagues. This is something that as pastors we really need, we really need to look at, and we're going to talk about that. And as we mentioned before, Father's Day sermon resources are coming. You'll see them at the Joy Starts Here website. Lots of good stuff there. Take a look at it. It'll be up and available in coming days. One of the things that Jen and I, my wife, do, we run Thrive training events, which are 5-day events. You come with a bonded partner, and you strategically hands-on learn, practice joy skills and bonding exercises that's designed to grow your joy. And track 2 helps you return to joy from negative emotions, and track 3 helps you resolve the 5 kinds of pain that all of us experience. And this fall, you're going to hear more about this as well. As our Joy Starts Here event, we are very excited to talk about starting joy in your church, in your family, and in your school. So all of the authors plus some bonus presenters are going to be there, so more information is coming. And always have more good joy streams on the horizon. As I've mentioned mine, the next two already, we have Ken Smith, who is with us today. You're going to want to hear what Ken has to share because he has so much experience. Ken is on July 4th, and then Jerry Petite-Mermet, who's one of the Shepherd's House board members, will be with us on July 11th and talking about leadership and the Emmanuel lifestyle. And then David Tackle will be back on July 25th to talk about discerning our discernment. That'll be interesting. There's just a lot more in the pipeline here. And if you haven't seen the book, I highly recommend. We have the Beta 2 now available as of today with the assessments. And as Jim said, if you already have the Beta 1 version, you can have access to the assessments as well at the Joy Starts Here website. So a lot of good stuff there. We have a blog. So please take a look at the blog. This is a Design for Pastors. Carol Brown, my friend and colleague, is running the blog. You'll hear a lot of the information that you're hearing here, and it's just unpacked, and it's good. So I am running out of time. I would like to close with the thought that you could find more resources about Dr. Wilder's teachings, the Jesus in Mind teachings, as well as a lot more good teaching material at the lifemodel.org website. And Ed Corey is just overseeing the Thriving Recover Your Life program. This is about bringing this to your community. So much good stuff there. But for the sake of time, I just want to close with a blessing to all of you. Thank you, Denny, for your work making this possible. Thank you, Dr. Wilder, for being here. And thank you, friends, for taking the time to join us today. I look forward to seeing you in just a couple weeks for our next JOYStream. God bless you today.
All right, everybody, have a good afternoon. Thank you very much.